Good morning, friends. How are you today? I'm so glad to see you. Today I have a lesson for you that's about plot. Plot is what happens in a story, and we are going to read Where the Wild Things Are to explore plot. You probably have read this story before. I find myself picking books that I just loved when I was a kid, and that I made sure when I became a teacher and a parent that I had in my house. You may have seen the movie of this book, but it's drastically different than what the book is. So we're gonna quickly, before we get going on our story today, we're gonna go ahead and look at what plot means. So plot is the action that happens during a story. So this is everything that happens in a story. And if you think of any story, they all have something like this. Sometimes it's a lot more pronounced and it's really obvious, and sometimes it's a little hard to see it. But we've done a lesson before about setting. And the setting was a Little House on the Prairie one. And that talked about where and when a story happens. So when the story opens up, we always like to know what to expect in the story and where we're going to be, and just to have the basics of it. And we also need to know who the character is. So where, when, and who is what happens at the very beginning. And then there's always a problem in a story. There's something that gets introduced in a story that happens that makes a whole bunch of other stuff afterwards start to happen as a result of that problem. And it can be a big problem, like somebody gets in a fight, or it can be a problem that doesn't quite look like a problem, like in the Going West story, Pa decides they're going to move. It's just kind of something that happens that propels the story forward. After they introduce the problem, there's a whole lot of stuff that happens around the story and around the problem that kind of helps to facilitate moving the story forward. And then there's always a part of a story that's called the climax. And that's the turning point in the story. And that's kind of where the problem gets a little bit solved, and where things start to reach, it's usually the most exciting part of the story. And after that, there's the solution. How are we going to solve that problem? And then the conclusion. So the story is shaped like this because it starts out not boring, but it's not the most exciting part at the very beginning. And then, oh my gosh, something happens, and all these other things happen, and then, oh, we figure out what to do. It's the most exciting part, and oh, now we know what to do. And then we come to the end, and there's a nice resolution that feels good at the end. So we're going to read Where the Wild Things Are, like I said, to explore the plot of a story today. So the cover looks like this. It's by Maurice Sendak. He did both the pictures and the story in here. I love the inside cover. Doesn't that look like a wild place? Where the Wild Things Are. And this is by HarperCollins Publishers. And this is Max. These are wild things. The night Max I should probably tell you what we're going to do, what our activity is today. So in the story, you will see certain parts where I have a sticky note. And what we're going to do is we're going to identify the parts of this story, and we're just going to put a sticky note over each part of this to show the different parts of what's happening in our story. Okay, sorry I didn't say that. That night, Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another. So our setting says it right here. Max is at home around dinner time making mischief. So you can see right there, he's bothering the dog. So that's our setting. That's our character. Now we know about what's going on right there. His mother called him "wild thing," and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without eating anything. And look at that face. It doesn't look very happy, does it? And that right there is our problem. Max tells his mom he'll eat her up, so he is sent to his room without supper. That is our problem. So we're going to put that right there. See, already, just in the first little bit, we have the basics of our story. And something that I just want you to notice, readers, as we're going through this, is this story. I just think that Maurice Sendak is an amazing writer. But look at how small that picture is. And it got a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And pretty soon that world just takes over. And it gets so that it's so big that it just takes over everything. It's kind of cool. See, that's full page. So the world of Max grows bigger and bigger as we go into his imagination. And I just love that Maurice Sendak did that. That very night in Max's room, a forest grew. And grew. You can see we have just a little edge here of white. And now we are in his imagination 100%. And grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through night and day. And in and out of weeks, and almost over a year, to where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. But look at Max. He's like, whatever. I'm not scared of you. My mother said I'm the wildest thing of all. And so part of our rising action is a forest grows in the room. He sails to where the wild things are. So that's our rising action. So his imagination completely took over. A forest grows in his room. He sails to where the wild things are. Till Max said, "Be still," and tamed them with the magic trick of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once. And they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all. Look at that. Be still. And he tamed them all just by looking into their yellow eyes. And they made him the king of all wild things. And now, cried Max, let the wild rumpus start. I love this. We don't need words because we know what this feels like to have a wild rumpus. I know some of you have had a wild rumpus over the last couple days. Look at how much he's enjoying being with all those wild things. He can be as wild as he wants to be. He's the most wild thing of all. When I was a little girl, this was my favorite page. I loved this part where they're all hanging from the tree branches. That just looked like a lot of fun. And look at how satisfied he is. He still has that naughty face. But he's enjoying being a wild thing. And there he is, the king. So another part of our rising action is Max becomes the king of the wild things and has a wild rumpus. It's part of the rising action. So I'm going to put this right above there because that's still part of that rising action. A lot can happen during the rising action. It's not usually just one thing. It's several things. And here we have 3 things. Max becomes the king of the wild things and has a wild rumpus. A forest grows in his room. He sails to where the wild things are. All that happened before we get to the climax. Now stop, said Max, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of all wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Then all around from far away, across the world, he smelled good things to eat. So he gave up being king of where the wild things are. So this is the climax. Max misses being where he is loved most of all. I remember that when I would get sent to my room when I was a little girl. And that was so hard to be away from everybody, and I'd miss them. And at first I'd be angry and have my feelings about it. And then eventually I'd come around and be like, but I want to be included with my family. So I can really connect with Max right there and understand how he's feeling. But all those mads go away and you start realizing you just want to be with your family again. But the wild things cried, oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We love you so. And Max said, no. That was exactly what he said to his mother. I'll eat you up. And he said, I'll eat you up because he loved them so. The wild things roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped into his private boat and waved goodbye. He's like, see you later, alligators. Like, no, stay. We'll miss our king. Just like he misses his family. So now we're at the solution part. And I think you can probably guess what the solution is. He sailed back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day. So Max leaves the wild things and sails back home. That's the solution. Head back home. So I put that right there on the solution part. And into the night of his very own room where he found his supper waiting for him. Oh, he looks so happy to be home. His naughty face is gone. He's ready to be with his family. And it was still hot. So on this page we can tell we're totally out of his imagination. So he makes it home to find supper, hot and waiting for him. And that's the conclusion of this story. So the plot goes, zoop. I want you to be thinking a little bit about the stories that you have read on your own. And what are some of those rising actions? What is the climax, the most exciting part? How do they solve that problem? And how does it resolve at the end? Thank you for joining me today, friends. I have missed you so much, and it's so nice to connect with you like this. I appreciate you watching the YouTube, and have a wonderful day. Bye. I love you.